Kumari Campbell. NASA and the organising committee are really delighted to be able to have Fiona here. Fiona is currently a senior lecturer in the School of Education and Social Work at the University of Dundee. She was Deputy Head of School at Griffith Law School in Australia and worked extensively in Australia. Fiona has written and taught extensively on issues related to global South decolonisation, disability, philosophy of ableism, disability in Sri Lanka, and is recognised as a world leader in scholarship around disability studies and ableism. Fiona did share with me that university hasn't been a direct route for her. When she was 18, one of her earliest jobs was working in a sheltered workshop, putting knives and forks into boxes. And at the time, a social worker told her that she booked a care home for her and to forget about uni, because it wasn't for her. The sheltered workshop had long corridors leading to the toilets, which were separated by personal experience. And Fiona has memories of that experience that she brings with her. So clearly she's proven that social worker wrong, and she's here today. And so I'm really delighted to put you over to Fiona.
Right, so we're just going to get hooked up, and Jackie's kindly going to do the PowerPoint. I said I didn't want to go in the naughty corner over there, that you actually wanted to see the speaker. I seem to have spent my life in the naughty corner. A couple of months ago when I was approached to do this presentation, I was in quite an upbeat, good mood, feeling self-confident, and came up with the title. And then between that time and having to put the PowerPoints together, it's been quite a difficult few months. So you'll get some of that sense of that in the presentation. I almost didn't use PowerPoints. I've got issues about PowerPoints, but so this is going to be a combination of a wee bit of academic content, but it will be interwoven with personal observations. Because for me, with my scholarship, it is by its nature embodied. So it always comes from personal experiences, and I think that's really important. That's certainly the driving agent. And certainly in the past, people have said to me, why can't you, we want you to say more a bit about you, the you behind the work. So anyway, so we'll go to the next slide. So I was thinking about this intersectionality issue, and I'm just picking up on some of the discussions this morning. I actually don't know what it means to be normal. I have absolutely no experience of it. And it's like that Mars-Venus thing that people talk about, you know. I've always, throughout my life, and I'm 56, I've always felt like I'm always an outsider looking in at some very strange people, who happen to be the majority, unfortunately. But, so that's all, and so there's interesting issues around alienation and always the outsider looking in. And as I said on the PowerPoint slides, I went to 12 schools. That's another whole story in itself. I've moved around most of my life. I've discovered since, particularly coming to the UK, that lots of people don't move around. In fact, some people don't go out of a 10 to 15 kilometre radius of where they were born. That's a really interesting experience too. I put diversity extraordinaire. Actually, people used to say to me, oh, you're just diversity on wheels. And it was actually seen as a bit of a slight. And I put vomit up there because it's kind of like this kind of celebration of diversity. I will say, not that I've ever wanted to do it, but I've never been a poster girl for diversity. I think because I've actually been a pain in the arse and I've caused trouble. They're not great people to have on posters, by the way, troublemakers, a pain. And I'm interested in this conference, politically in terms of the theme of intersectionality, but because that's also surrounding my life, and I want to talk about what intersectionality means in terms of equality and diversity, and what it might mean in terms of the Equalities Act. And I probably am going, I don't know who's in the audience, and I'm probably going to say some things that might make people uncomfortable, that you might even find disturbing. But actually, I think disturbing ideas are actually quite important. So, in terms of the kind of like allegiance, yes, I am lesbian, I am disabled, I am mixed race, I am Buddhist and Jewish. Before anyone says, how can you be all those things? I am. And there's probably a whole lot of other things there. And if I was a cartoonist, I always had this image. I just hope to God that the Equality Network meetings aren't all on at the same day and same time, because I would be running between the rooms. And that's kind of like, you know, which one do you pick? And it's interesting with these networks because they are almost self-contained, these networks, about what other aspects of your reality do you disclose within these networks, because they have their own personalisation and politics. As it is, it's enough to go into the BAME network and they look at you, and I know what they're thinking, like, hang on, here's this white girl coming in. What, you know, and she says she's Asian, is she kind of like deluded? What the hell, you know? And you know they're saying, I'll say, yeah, I'm the white Sri Lankan folks, hi. You know, hi. And because, you know, there's all these kind of uncomfortable conversations. One of the things that I wanted to look at is, you know, when we look at equality stuff, are we talking about difference or sameness? Now, often you get this line, oh yes, we're all the same, and that's the basis for equality. We are all the same, you know. And what I want you to think about is, in fact, are we actually all the same? We're the same in terms of being human. But actually, I would probably argue that, given that we are shaped and formed by our varied lived experiences, it actually makes us different. But what we want to do is embrace difference. Difference shouldn't mean inequality. Okay? So I think that there's always a tension there. And when we talk about integration, and I'm going to use the word throughout my talk, assimilation, because I actually think that a lot of the equalities agenda, whether it is in the UK or in Australia, is based on assimilation. It's still very much about fitting minorities into an uncontestable norm that constantly keeps maintaining itself. There might be little crevices and little spaces that open up to make things a little bit more comfortable, but we're not shining the spotlight on what it means to be part of what I call pervasive majority culture. And in fact, I must say tactically now, I've been using the word majorities, that's them, majorities. Because we're so used to the language of minorities, why can't we name these people for what they are? They are the majorities. They are people who have power and entitlement. And one of the things about being a majority is that most majorities don't see their pervasiveness. They don't see their entitlement. And for those of you who are familiar with some of the race politics, we talk about white pervasiveness. Most white people don't think about what does it mean to be white, you know. So some of those kind of issues. So apart from that, as I said, apart from academic and reading, and I don't really know how majorities experience life. I can look at it through an academic textbook, but it's totally strange. Next slide. Yep. So I've put up there intersectionalities, and I'm going to read this quote because for access reasons pretty quickly. So this is by Patricia Collins. I can't remember the woman's first name. But anyway, this is one of the ones, it's a book on intersectionality that's well known. So they say intersectionality is a way of understanding and analysing the complexity in the world, in people, and in human experiences. When it comes to social inequality, people's lives and the organisation of social power in a given society are better understood as being shaped not by a single axis of social division, be it race or gender or class. Note, I've put in or age or disability, so these are the most progressive writers of intersectionality, and disability is not mentioned as an axis of subordination. And I'm sick to death of it, by the way. 2019, I'm sick of progressive social theorists having disability as an afterthought. It's not good enough, and we need to call these people out. Okay? So that's really important. But by many axes that work together and influence each other. So this is what I'm going to talk about, how these things work together and influence each other. And how do we still then engage in university systems that very much are technicist. I mean, universities are more bureaucratic than bureaucracies. The only thing is they tend not to do bureaucracy well. Yeah? But constantly we have this process of differentiation. So I'm going to be talking about that a bit more. Okay, move the next slide. I'm rushing through because I have a tendency to run over time. So I just want to put some things to think about. When we talk about intersectionality theory, one of the things is we need to think about, well, how does intersectionality theory understand marginalisation? In other words, what's driving marginalisation? What kinds of, when people talk about intersectionality theory, what are their ideas of power? Now, I'm not going to give you answers there, but that's where I would get my little kind of crack detector coming up, saying, well, how do they understand power and how do they understand marginalisation? Okay, and this is really important because some people see intersectionality as like colours on a palette, like a bit of mix and match, yeah? Or someone the other day said it was like a brick wall, stacking up bricks, and I was kind of like going, yeah, leaning over, like this kind of, so people have very different views about intersectionality theory. As I said, I think ableism is often left out as an axis of subordination. Now, this is not a lecture on ableism, it could have been, but one of my views about ableism is about the idea of ability, right? The virtue, so-called virtue of ability. And in fact, the virtue of ability has infected our politics about race, throughout history. People of colour have been seen as delayed, physically delayed, mentally delayed, emotionally delayed. Whole civilizations have been seen as ontologically disabled. So this idea of ability infuses racism discourses. Same with homosexuality, just to use the old phrase, is seen to not come up to scratch. We lose our abilities because traditionally, up until recently, we did not have the ability to reproduce. Okay, so you think about some of the discourses around that. In terms of my own thinking, and I've been working on ableism since 2001, and most of my best ideas are sitting on the toilet or the bath. That's just a little hint, it just sort of comes down. And I was thinking about, what's important to the idea, how does ableism actually work, and how can we simplify it without making it kind of too simple? Because ableism is really complex. So I came up with a couple of categories. So one is differentiation. We like to divide and say this one's different from this, you're different from that, and to divide people. This will come up in my slides, okay? An obsession with classification, okay? And if you think that I'm being a bit over the top, Ian Hacking has done work on this, and he's looked at norsologies of death, right? So different reasons why for causes of death throughout the ages. And he said now, according to the World Health Organization, did you know it's illegal to die of old age? Doctors can't say on a death certificate this person's they died out of old age. It has to, because it doesn't fit into the categories, right? So this is kind of this differentiation. We also rank, right? And Randall Kennedy, an African-American scholar, he talked about being an accountant of atrocity. I love those words, accountant of atrocity. This idea that we rank whose suffering's worse than others, who's more important. The speaker this morning talked about this issue of acquired disability and people born disabled. I actually think that's too narrow an issue. I think it's about where the experience of disability occurs across the lifespan. These kind of, where, depending on when it happens in your life, what are the markers of adulthood and maturity and opportunity? Negation is another one. Oh, I'm not like those people. Hey? I might be disabled, but I'm not like those people with learning disability, right? I might be lesbian, but I'm not like those kind of really strange kind of drag queen kind of people. You know, it's this negation. I'm not like them. Sometimes people talk about in terms of defensive othering. Okay, but then this issue of boxes. Some of us don't neatly fit in boxes. What about people with transitory and changeable disabilities? So this kind of negation then is really important. The sign language interpreters asked me about what this word notification meant, and that's really about the fact that we actually all need papers. As Foucault said, we need to have our papers in order. So in the disability area, those of you who have experience of disability, we need certificates to tell us, authorising certificates by what I call technicians of certification. That's their job, right? To say, what are you? What do you got? Okay, so, and it's not about your experience. And in the university system, constantly, many of us, whether we're students or academics, have to have our disability certified. If we don't have that done, we have to be registered, yeah? Otherwise you can't get access to reasonable adjustments, okay? And then there's the prioritisation. Certain groups get higher priorities. I think even in universities, you'll know the equality and diversity, political gender is really interesting. It's Athena Swan, let's gung-ho, gender. I mean, I've had huge battles about that over the years, about how much they're committed to intersectionality and, you know, including these kind of other groups in. And now we've got, certainly at my university, we've just signed up for the race charter, yay. You know, that will start moving, but, you know, disability is kind of, it's down there at the bottom of the pile. So what do I want to say? Just minding the time here, a couple of things as I move through. So I don't think, for example, we've got to really watch and remind people not all experiences are reducible to a label. And in terms of disability issues, even to diagnosticism, you might have people with the same impairment, but how that impairment expresses itself and how that impairment has impacted on their life can be radically different with someone with the same identical impairment. And I think we really need to keep reminding of this. I think there are some really big tensions that I struggle with at this whole issue about identity politics versus what I call majority pervasiveness. What do I mean by this? I'm in charge of and lead a research centre around marginality. It's called peripheries. And we use that language, and I remember somebody saying to me, oh, but you people are all about identity politics. And you know, there's a lot of people who don't like identity politics, right? And I kept saying, actually, we're not about identity politics, but so what? You know, many marginal groups have been forced into identity politics, gathering together with other similarly situated folk. Because, again, we need to remind people, do you know what? Nothing has ever been given to us on a platter. You know? So in terms of that majority politics, minorities, peripheral peoples have only got equality, have only got social justice because we've fought bloody hard to get it. And need to continue doing that. And I think, you know, I think we need to remind that because there's quite I don't know what it's like in your situations, but there's quite a kind of anti-identity politics kind of feel around things. The other thing I'm going to raise before I move on to the next slide, I might move on to the next slide. How am I going to time? Timekeeper? Oh, okay, I knew you'd do that. Okay. Is I think we need to, because I want to move through the other slides quickly. I think as a group, we need to be more tactical. I believe that we need to engage in public interest litigation to test the parameters of the Equalities Act. And I'm quite surprised, I can only talk about the disability area, that there's only one disability law centre in the whole of the UK, by the way. But we need to be able to test interpretations of legislation. We really need to push on this, and if we can do it in terms of intersectionality, that's better. If we can skip that next slide and move through, actually move through the one that says silos, given I've got 5 minutes. Okay. So I just wanted, this is where it gets a bit academic, but I just wanted to look at this I think it's great that we've got the protected characteristics, but how are these managed? One of the things that, we need to remember the Equalities Framework, or the Equalities Act, is one approach to looking at discrimination and social justice. It uses a discrimination paradigm. There are other ways of tackling inequality. We can look at theories of power, theories of marginality. Okay, so I think it's really important we don't just put all our eggs in one basket for a start. Now, and in fact, really maybe, and that's focusing on us as having protected characteristics. I actually also think we need to, and this is where this conference is great because we can organise, we actually need to focus more on institutional racism, institutional ableism, and systems that entitle. So instead of putting the spotlight on us, actually I think we need to turn the spotlight back on them, the majorities. We're not looking at these people. How do they get their power? How do they bloody keep it? How do they constantly recuperate our ideas? What do I mean by that? Even lovely sexy words like equality and justice just become part of the bureaucratic system, yeah? So we really need to look at how does this institutionalisation happen, because that's the stuff that makes life very uncomfortable for us day in, day out. There's a mismatch often between the protected characteristics and the lived experience. And one of the things I was going to say is, one of my concerns about the protected characteristics is it really is a silo. It's in little troughs, it's compartmentalised, right? And there's not a sense of how different things, how life is really experienced, particularly for those of us who cross the various groups. Okay, I'm actually going to move to, have I got 2 minutes? So I'm bargaining with the man over there, so I'm bargaining. Okay, maybe we do the poster girl pest one. I have to take, and it's a shame he's not here, I do have to actually take issue with one of the comments that the speaker said this morning. See, we're going to have some debate now. I actually don't think that we choose our identities. I think that's a very neoliberal idea of people choosing their identities. Many of us have our identities actually imposed upon us. The choice that we have is buying into the game of how do we interpolate them, like how we manage that imposed identity. You know, do we take on board those issues, or do we reshape it? But you know, those of us here, and most people in the room who are part of minority groups, we're constantly engaged in emotions management. So I think that is really important. I think we also need to look at what does authentic leadership actually mean. It's very hard to be an authentic leader when it's based on the idea of being a leader within a pre-existing system. You have to talk the talk, you have to walk the walk, the very language you use, when you pull a face, when you smile, when you're pleasant, okay? Because again, it assumes an assimilationist model, okay? And why I'm saying this, and you know, grant me the time here because this is really important. Everybody has to look after themselves. In Australia, we had a situation where many Indigenous people, First Nation people, who were successful leaders, they were the poster girls and boys of, you know, diversity, yeah? But what happened? Many of those people were starting to commit suicide. We have high numbers, right? And in the disability community, people who were deemed success stories of inclusion were killing themselves. We need to know what's going on. There is something about putting on happy faces all the time. At what cost? I've put poster girl or pest, and I'm just going to finish with this slide here. You know, one of the things that I deal with, and I said I acquired my disability at 18 and now 56, is the accumulated effects of social exclusion. What are the accumulated costs of living with day-to-day humiliation? I'm not in a great place at the moment because I think I'm really burnt out. I'm exhausted of constantly having to struggle, okay? And we need to look at ways that we can support each other because social exclusion kills. And if we want to help support leadership, we need to find ways to do it in a communal way. I put poster girl or pest because, you know, at the end of the day, whose responsibility is diversity and equalities? Actually, you know, I've recently made a decision. You probably know Scotland, maybe, hopefully you do. You know, under 3% of the population are from a BAME background, right? It's a big shock for me. Even though I'm white passing, it's a really big shock for me. And it's really stressful to constantly keep saying, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Actually, I've decided to back off from equality and diversity. I actually think the responsibility is on majority populations. If they are committed to equality and diversity like they say they are the ones that need to take leadership around this. You know, it's constantly, you know, people of colour that have to keep raising racism issues, disabled people have to keep raising disability issues, LGBTIQ and the rest have to keep raising those issues. So I think, you know, this is the sort of stuff that really, at the end of the day, we need to look at. I think, actually just do the last slide. I think I'm just going to take 1 minute, Australian time. I just wanted to say, I wanted to look on a good note. I think we are products of stories at framers. I think storytelling is really powerful, you know, and there's a methodology called story research, and we need to talk about the stories that shape and frame us, including the intersectional stories. They don't contain us, however. We need to get support for anything we do, okay? But we also need to be aware of that powerful influence. Jacobs Overbow uses the word normative shadows. We want to belong, we want to fit in, and to realise that we're shaped by that system. And sometimes gaslighting can occur, people can play with our minds in a really awful way. And guess what? I'm actually, I love the word oddity, I'm odd. I'm sick of saying I want to fit in, okay? So I'm embracing the oddness, and I think it's being an outsider is a place of resistance. Thank you.